I've noticed a trend among the demographics of people who watch my channel. The people who see my lovely, stitched, and damaged face every time a video comes out tend to be male, and between the ages of 25 and 34. This is something that caused me a little bit of upset, mainly due to my age in comparison to the people who watch my channel. It's very strange for someone who's 22 to host a channel such as mine, where it's quite possible that most people who watch my channel are over a decade older than I am. I'm not entirely sure why this stirs my insides up, but it does to some degree. Many of them probably have a greater degree of formal education as opposed to me. I'm not an expert in any one topic, at least formally. I was a fairly quiet kid in high school. I participated in a mock political debate in front of the entire school one time, but other than that, I was pretty silent on the matter of politics and opinion. But I was an excellent listener and frequent reader. I listened to the adults when they were talking about important matters. I listened to people my age, and I read everything I could before audiobooks were easily accessible. What worries me about the next generation and my possible future children is what they will be listening to, what will be convincing them of certain positions they should hold. It's not like I would prevent my kids from listening to or reading a single book or watching a particular YouTube channel or news network, but I will carve into their minds the value of questioning everything. If there is one thing that can be justifiably put in the heads of children, it's the value of not simply believing whatever you hear. It may sound hypocritical to some sticklers, but it really isn't. It isn't brainwashing to teach children not to fall for brainwashing. If anything, you aren't washing their brain. You're simply providing them a lifetime supply of dirt to rub on spots that are a bit too clean. Don't forget, MTV, you're speaking to, generally, kids between the ages of 12 and 16. And people that age will more likely begin to question things they watch if they see someone else questioning things they watch. Hence, why I'm taking on this garbage today.
We have a serious sexual assault problem in the United States.
And I'm going to stop you right there. Oh, do we? Define sexual assault, and describe to me how you evaluate what is and is not a serious nationwide problem. That is the only antidote to the rhetorical cloak people like this wear. Force them into a position where they must be held to logical constraints of any type, and that peaceful-looking curtain will evaporate before your very eyes. Now, some of you may wonder why I constantly bring it back to words, but I do that because those are the tools used to manipulate people. Propagandists and oil merchants of every stripe will stack their claims with their own personal definition of a word, and yet when giving this information out to a wide array of people, allow the people getting the information to assume that they're using the common, widely used definition of that word. For example, if I personally define sexual assault as disagreeing with someone on the internet, I could say, we have a huge sexual assault problem in this country. But since people don't know I'm using a contrived definition, they simply assume people are being actually sexually assaulted left and right. That was an extreme example, but you get my point. Those who peddle this nonsense thrive on being able to avoid any questioning of their actual positions through word manipulation. And what's difficult in regards to arguing with these people is that word creation and defining words is not a logical practice, as in the definitions of words are whatever we make them out to be as the speaker of this particular language. It is the very description of ad populum. So it disturbs me deeply when words that were supposed to describe disgusting behavior are used to describe totally benign behavior, and are being taught to children as what those words are supposed to mean. Please stop attempting to make innocent people guilty of something because you think your definitions of guilty and innocent are better than everyone else's. I'm not so much saying focus on the words and only the words. I'm saying focus on what people actually mean by certain words. The last thing that is wanted by lexical thugs is people having the ability to identify what they mean. Forcing them outside of their rhetoric is nearly impossible. Even saying that we actually don't have a sexual assault problem in this country will drive them to the nearest awful example of a sexual assault and accusations that you think what happened to that person is acceptable or not a problem. It's literally all rhetoric. It's not rhetoric hoisted up by fact, it's rhetoric hoisted up by nothing. And when you say sexual assault, are you including women who, I don't know, shove their hand down a guy's pants when he's made it very clear that he didn't want any of that to occur? For some weird, unfathomable reason, I doubt you are. One sentence, folks. This could very possibly be a long response.
One of the reasons why, toxic masculinity.
What are the other reasons? Are women who commit sexual assaults, with males being the victims of said sexual assaults, plagued with toxic masculinity? Because when people describe toxic masculinity to me, they seem to be describing nothing except certain personality traits that could be present in either men or women. So one wonders why the term masculinity is slapped on there. There are certain personality traits that are toxic, if you want to use that term. Unquenchable jealousy, anger issues, propensity for violence, lack of empathy and whatnot, but those things are not specific to any one gender. So when someone says, men are taught to be these things, it makes me raise an eyebrow. Who is teaching them these things? And why do so many men not display these characteristics? Are they decent people despite society telling them these things? Or perhaps, is society not teaching those things in the first place? Society is everyone's favorite ghost villain. I'm going to keep a mental note of how many concrete things you actually say in this video, and all of the ambiguities. I'm going to hazard a guess that there will be more of one than the other.
Now let's be clear, masculinity is not inherently a bad thing.
Then say something good about it. Oh, did you? No, okay. No. Oh, did any? No. Oh, well, we might be here a while.
What's bad is when society tells us that being a man means things like strength and power at the expense of being allowed to really feel things.
So, society is telling us that being a man means being a psychopath. Well, I certainly didn't get the memo. First off, you aren't raised by society. You are raised by your parents. You actually have two people, if you're lucky, telling you what is right and wrong and how to operate in the world. They are your guides until you gain the ability to guide yourself through the world. I bet, if you went door to door and asked parents who have sons, are you raising your child to believe that being a man means strength and power at the expense of actually being able to feel feelings? I would wager that 99.9% of them will give you a disgusted look and say, absolutely not. I can only give my and my close friends' experiences, since I'm obviously not every single man, but I was raised not to believe that strength and power should be sought and feelings suppressed. I was raised to be self-reliant. And being self-reliant involves not going into a stressed-out sob fest whenever something doesn't go perfectly. You can still be stressed out, you can still be upset about whatever's messing you up, but there's a distinct difference between not feeling things and not allowing your feelings to control you. Just because someone doesn't express their emotions 24/7 doesn't mean that they don't have them, and someone doesn't stop having feelings simply because they don't express them in the exact way you decide they should express them.
Imagine your favorite male protagonist. Is he cold and aloof? Hardened, brooding? Does he scowl, make dark jokes in the face of danger? Well, this is our cultural ideal of manhood.
That's right, kids. Are you fans of Batman and Iron Man? Do you like those protagonists as superheroes that you know don't actually exist as real people? Do you like going to see those harmless movies? Are you a fan of male heroes whose personalities are useful in driving a story arc or are forced into situations that require courage? Congratulations. You're a fan of toxic masculinity. Sinister stuff here, folks. Female protagonists work the same way in similar genres. I mean, look at Black Widow if you want. Same movie. Is she a character who expresses emotions all the time within the movies? If anything can be drawn from what you're saying here, it's that this is our cultural idea of an action hero.
It gets worse when anything that society deems feminine, like having feelings, is pegged as a threat to manhood.
You showed us a clip of a man crying, for what reasons we have no idea. Then what I presume is a female hand, due to the nails, gender stereotyping, slaps him across the face, and then he gets angry. I see nothing toxic about this on the part of the man. If I were slapped by someone while opening up in such an immense way, I'd be angry too. I could control it, but I'd definitely be angry. What's interesting though, and maybe this is focusing too much on the visual, is that the woman slapping the crying man is not seen as toxic. The man reacting angrily to being slapped is. Is anger not an emotion anymore?
The worst thing a manly man can do is act like a woman.
Manly man. Isn't that redundant? I mean, I thought it was. It's like saying coffee-flavored coffee or bluish blue. Okay, so I'm going to assume that acting like a woman is doing things that would traditionally be seen as feminine, like, I don't know, knitting or something. Just the basest stereotype you could find. When other men figure out that one of their friends is into knitting, at least in my experience, I have to keep saying this to avoid accusations of speaking for all men here. Sure, there might be a couple of jokes about it, but men give each other shit all the time. It's how a lot of men bond with one another, but it wouldn't be serious shaming of any sort. It's just bants, man.
Side note, this is also why toxic masculinity is super homophobic.
Would you have a problem with a gay man calling me a fag, just in jest? Is that homophobia? Because I think that's actual progress of a kind.
DeAndre Levy of the Detroit Lions wrote recently, quote, "It's truly astounding how many awful things that occur in this world because men are afraid of appearing weak."
Wait. Do you think that acting like a woman is appearing weak? You just said that the worst thing a manly man can do is act like a woman, then give this quote saying that bad things happen because men are afraid of appearing weak. Or do you think that the average man thinks that women are weak creatures? Ask any American man to describe his mother or sisters. People, generally, avoid weakness, not because it makes them any more a specific gender, but they avoid it because it is weakness. Weakness is not attractive, and weakness is not helpful. Having bouts of weakness is okay. Everybody is vulnerable and should acknowledge that. But allowing yourself to depend on your weakness or be defined by your weakness is very not okay. It's like saying men don't want to be overly jealous so as to not act like women. No, people don't want to be overly jealous because being overly jealous is a shit thing to be for anyone.
Levy notes that in locker rooms, power is measured in sexual conquests, dehumanizing women in the process.
Oh yeah, totally. The men who actually do brag about that sort of thing aren't bragging over the fact that they've had a lot of sex. They're bragging over the fact that they are desired by many women. It's not dehumanizing in the sense that women are objects. It's another unhealthy practice in which men define their worth as men by the desires of women. Objects don't have desires.
We're so caught up in these toxic ideas that a woman granting her affirmative consent to sex, well, that too often becomes secondary to our needs.
Speak for yourself, you wimpled, fat-lunged lewdster. I'm not caught up in these things. And neither are the kids you're talking to. You might be, but I certainly am not. I never understood how affirmative consent, as in getting a verbal yes, is the only way to achieve proper legal consent. It's like body language doesn't even matter. If you believe that affirmative consent is the only way to achieve consent, then you must also believe that it is possible for two people to rape each other simultaneously if neither one of them gives a distinct verbal yes. So somehow, both people didn't want this action to occur, but it still ended up happening. You are not in the mind of every person. Stop acting like you are. Also, to you, the person running this show, have you ever had sex with someone where you didn't get a distinct verbal yes? I mean, even with like a wife of 10 years who already knows all of your sexual cues and you know all of hers. Even if everything was fine before, during, and after the act and everyone enjoyed it just splendidly, have you ever done that? If you have, are you willing to call yourself a rapist? Are you willing to remain consistent in your belief if it means you must admit that you have, in fact, committed rape? Think about that.
Let's put that in the context of American colleges and universities, where sexual assault has become an epidemic.
False.
Reported sex crimes increased 126% from 2001 to 2013.
I looked at the source. Reported sex crimes increased from 2,200 to 5,000. Not sex crimes in fact, reported sex crimes. They define forcible sex crime as any sexual act directed against another person forcibly and or against that person's will, which sounds like a decent definition until I bring up the words sexual harassment. Does making lewd comments to women count as sexual harassment, or a sexual act directed at another person forcibly and or against that person's will, which would therefore be a sex crime? I've stopped taking literally anything for granted when discussing this issue. I refuse to think that anyone is being honest with me about this. Are you telling me that reports of forcible sex crime increased in a location where nearly everything can be considered a sex crime? Well, dearie me. And also, 5,000 reports of something countrywide isn't exactly an epidemic. That's why you use the percentage instead of the raw number when speaking to impressionable kids, isn't it, you disgusting fearmonger?
College is a petri dish for bad ideas about sexual behavior, a place that often magnifies toxic conceptions of masculinity.
So even though the definition of a sex crime was gender neutral, you're going to go ahead and crap on men some more. Okay.
Too many men learn in college to view women as things to be aggressively obtained, to be conquered, to be used for our enjoyment and pleasure.
Prove it.
That's just part of what we know as rape culture. All the ideas and beliefs that make people think sexual violence is acceptable.
Here's your problem. There are barely any human beings who think sexual violence is acceptable. It would take you months, if not years, to find a single person who actually believes that sexual violence is acceptable. Internet comments don't count, and then you'd need to observe how our society treats that person. Do they adore them, or do they ostracize them? What I find sinister about this, and this is entirely speculation via observation, you're not just inventing fictional enemies. You're trying to get teenagers to see the enemy in themselves and others. You're trying to convince teenagers that to some degree they actually do think sexual violence is acceptable, and so do their friends and parents when it isn't true. You're trying to connect enjoying movies with certain types of male protagonists with supporting a male attitude that promotes sexual violence. And the reason your horrific little tactic works is because everyone wants to believe themselves to be, in some sense, better than the average person. So when they are confronted with this question, and they aren't convinced that they believe the things you're spouting by enjoying Iron Man movies, they think they are one of the high-minded few who abhor sexual violence. Well, I have some unfortunate news for you. The average person does abhor sexual violence. If that was the only thing hoisting you above what you see to be the unwashed masses, then what does that make you?
Rape culture includes the misogynist images we're fed in popular culture, where male violence is depicted as sexually alluring and something that enhances the protagonist's manhood.
Case in point. Also, were those misogynist images more popular with men or women? Because I can think of a certain number of hues of a certain color that was a bestseller among women.
Toxic masculinity, when you think about it, is very selfish. A lot of that is about entitlement. We're entitled to a voice.
Wait, what?
We're entitled to a voice.
One more time.
We're entitled to a voice.
Earlier in the video, you described a situation in which men are taught to seek strength and power as opposed to actually feeling things. This is that situation, and you are the one promoting it. Men aren't entitled to a voice. Oh sure, boys, we care about your feelings, and you should feel free to express them, but you aren't entitled to your voice, so shut the fuck up because women are talking right now. Quit being so entitled and toxic! You're speaking to kids in their most formative years and telling them that it is toxic and selfish to feel entitled to a voice due to their birth conditions directly after saying that men are prevented in our culture from expressing certain things. To quote Falk Greville, "O wearisome condition of humanity, born under one law to another bound, vainly begot and yet forbidden vanity, created sick, commanded to be sound."
Entitled to a job, entitled to sex, all these things we're told we deserve because we're guys.
That's right, men. You're told that you deserve a voice, not because you're human beings who are actually entitled to opinions and the expression of those opinions, but because you're men. Men are not taught that they are entitled to sex. No one teaches children to rape. The entitled to a job thing is idiotic as well. I think I know what you mean, though. You're probably using that to mean men aren't entitled to a job if women are applying as well, huh? I want anyone who believes this to give me 30 concrete examples of men actually being taught these things. This vague crap doesn't cut it anymore. Any examples of it not happening, or the opposite happening, no matter how numerous they are, sways you. You can dismiss those people by saying you don't represent all of society, or just because you've never seen it happen and don't know anybody who it's happened to and haven't heard any actual examples of men being taught this doesn't mean it isn't prevalent. Actually, yes. Yes, it does. That's exactly what it means. You can't cite 1, 5, 10, or even 20 examples of something happening and claim that it is what society teaches men. This is a perfect example of the strategy you morons always revert to. The standard becomes the anomaly, and the anomaly becomes the standard. All of this is done so you can scare teenagers into believing what you believe. You're trying to make women fear men and men fear themselves. Screw off.
Some of us don't react well when we're challenged. Women disagreeing with us or telling us no, for example.
Nope, that's just toxic femininity being selfish again by thinking women are entitled to a voice. If that sentence didn't spiral you into some sort of epiphany, then you're too far gone as it is. Yeah, this person's terminal. Time to mock the rest of the video.
In those moments, we react how we've learned to, with aggression, with harassment, with violence.
I'm very grateful that you're admitting your problems to me, sir, but I think that your psychological issues go deeper than that. See, you've spent your whole life blaming society for your unhealthy behavior, when in reality, you were in control of it the whole time. You're currently trying to shift the blame from yourself to society for your anger issues, when that is unhealthy as well. You create all of your own problems and then refuse to accept any responsibility for those problems because society is what forced you into this. I see lots of self-destructive behavior in you. I suggest we set up a schedule where you can meet with me and not talk for an hour every Thursday because you're not entitled to a voice, but I still demand payment.
We've got to unlearn that stuff. Basically, toxic masculinity has screwed us guys up.
Excuse me, sir. I have a loving family and a job as a YouTube therapist. I don't much appreciate being told I'm screwed up when I'm quite clearly not. I'm the only person apart from you in this office, and you're still trying to drag strangers into your personal problems. I haven't met you, and you're still trying to pawn off your problems onto other things. The moment that you admit all of your emotional problems are caused by you, healing can begin.
Anger, violence, and entitlement are not admirable qualities. And coming to grips with that is the first step in understanding that ending sexual assault is our problem to solve too.
No, those are not admirable qualities, but they can be present in both men and women. Yet you see them in yourself. Meditate on this koan for a while, and an answer will present itself to you, my young pupil.
So how do we solve this? How do we detox? Hold friends accountable, and intervene when you see harassment or assault. Don't be the guy who wishes he'd said something to stop his friend.
Men, on the whole, agree with you already. Whether their intervention consists of simply saying, "Come on, man, that's enough," if there's bullying going on, to calling the cops when there is an assault going on, or to actually physically intervene when an assault occurs. You're seeing poison where there is none. You're looking past the hundreds of thousands of good men to find a bad one, and you're using that bad one to call the other hundreds of thousands of good men toxic.
Listen to survivors and believe them when they speak up. If you don't, it has a chilling effect for others who have experienced sexual assault. They see other survivors being shut down or dismissed and think it would be easier to stay quiet.
You raped me.
Read and understand legislation that's addressing the problem, including a bill called the Campus Safety and Accountability Act, which would create incentives for schools to better protect students from sexual assault. If you support bills like this, let your senator or representative know. If not, be constructive and suggest ways to improve them.
That's what it always comes back to, isn't it? Let's flesh out the reasoning here. If you like movies like Iron Man and Batman due to the main characters, you support a toxic form of masculinity that leads to sexual assault epidemics on campus in the real world, and in order to fix it, here's a law that we propose that doesn't take into account any form of abuse of its provisions. Oh my goodness, it's so simple!
And most of all, learn about and practice affirmative consent, which means all parties in sexual activity communicating an explicit yes.
Have any of these people had sex? Or been in a relationship? You can determine that consent was given or not based on body language and the context of your actions. I mean, maybe you can't and need cue cards for when to either stop trying to kiss someone or when to continue, but I don't have that problem. Here's a hint. If they're pushing you away and look disgusted, stop. If they continue to kiss you and wrap their arms around you, Keep going. You can't be this dumb. They don't need to explicitly say yes or no for you to understand that, do they?
And when one person's mental state is impaired because they're drunk or high, there is no consent.
I have given consent while I was impaired by alcohol, and I'm just fine, thanks. I'm not interested in calling that particular someone a rapist of any stripe because it isn't true. Get out of my bedroom.
I'm Jamil Smith, and this is The Racket.
He called it The Racket. Oh.